and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Josh Denny is a comedian. You may have heard of him. He used to work for the Food Network. He's also pro-life, personally, and willing to say so out loud. Earlier this month, Denny was preparing to host a comedy show in Rutherford, New Jersey. That's about a half hour outside of New York. But just minutes after the show was announced, Antifa, a violent radical group, decided to shut it down. Hundreds of Antifa-affiliated Twitter accounts started bombarding the venue, called the Williams Center. They also went after the chief of police of Rutherford, a man called John Russo, and they threatened violence. Now, at that point, a chief of police who wanted to defend the Constitution, his solemn duty, would have pushed back and affirmed the sacred right of free expression of every American. But that's not what Chief Russo did. Instead, he caved to the demands of the mob. He warned the venue that the venue might face civil liability if they let free speech continue, if they allowed the show to go on. Then he said he would shut down the show on, quote, public safety grounds. So ultimately, the Williams Center had no choice and canceled the show. In the end, the only people who showed up at the Williams Center that night were several police officers, and they were there to make sure there was no comedy taking place, none at all. Then, to add insult to injury, the next morning, the mayor of Rutherford, New Jersey, Frank Nunziato, bragged about what the city had done. He said it was his decision to use the power of the state to cut down comedy. Quote, unbeknownst to the borough, Nunziato wrote, an event was planned for this evening at the Williams Center, news of which quickly circulated through social media. Online intelligence led the police department to believe that the event had the potential for confrontation. Therefore, Nunziato said, quote, after discussions with the owner, the event has been canceled. Now, notice the blame shifting here, the potential for confrontation. It wasn't the comedian who was going to confront or threaten anyone with violence. It was the radical left-wing group Antifa, but it was the comedian who was punished. This is not the first time Josh Denny has experienced this. It's happened 4 times in just the past few weeks. Shows canceled because of threats from the left. 2 shows were canceled in Chicago, another 2 in New York. And every time the same pattern. Denny would schedule a comedy show, then a huge amount of Antifa-affiliated Twitter accounts intimidated the venue and local officials who collapsed under the pressure and shut it down. Denny can no longer speak. At this point, the only way he can host a show north of the Mason-Dixon line is to deliver cryptic instructions to his fans about where to meet secretly, like a speakeasy. Otherwise, if he doesn't do this, all Antifa has to do to end free speech is send some tweets, and then weak leaders capitulate immediately. Josh Denny is not the only performer being targeted, and it's not just comedians. This, of course, is part of a much larger campaign to end free speech in the United States, a country whose civic religion was free speech just a few years ago. This is a huge change and an ominous one. Anyone who tells you you can't say what you truly believe is a totalitarian. Make no mistake. It's not about sensitivity. It's about controlling you. It's totalitarian. We're going to start tonight with what's happening to comedians, because free society requires comedians. Comedy is the way we tell the truth. The presence of comedians in a society means that you get to mock the people in charge. Very quickly, and it's not an accident, we're running out of comedians. Only rote comedy is tolerated now. And that's another way of saying no comedy is tolerated now. Elon Musk pointed this out a few months ago in an interview with the satire site, The Babylon Bee.
And then you realize it's like, wait a second, is the comedy getting at an essential truth, or trying to, or is there a propaganda element, or is it trying to push you in a particular direction, or getting to an essential truth that is humorous? Mm-hmm. And when it stops trying to get to an essential truth that is humorous, then it's just not that funny.
Well, after that interview, Twitter, as if to prove it has no sense of humor at all, banned the Babylon Bee. Their crime? They made fun of the administration's fake trans admiral, that guy in a dress they're calling female. We all know what Elon Musk did next. He bought Twitter. In a moment, we'll speak to the CEO of the Babylon Bee about what Musk must do to restore free speech to this country. What is clear at this point is that after Elon Musk fired half of Twitter's employees, Twitter got better. Why? Because they were the censors. And Twitter isn't the only company many of whose employees work effectively as censors to shut down your freedom to say what you think. Outside Netflix headquarters last year, protesters, some of them Netflix employees, gathered to demand the censorship of Dave Chappelle. Watch this.
Accountability! When do we want it? Now! When do we want accountability? When do we want it? Now!
It's okay to laugh, but you're sparking hate conversation.
Why is he breaking my sign? Breaking my sign! He's got a weapon! He's got a weapon!
So what you had at Netflix is what you also had at Twitter, and it's the same phenomenon that's canceling comedians all over the country. A small group of politically inflamed, highly motivated extremists who prevent the majority from saying what it thinks. Another word for that is tyranny, and it's everywhere. One of the few people in Hollywood willing to fight back against this and say what he really thinks is Adam Carolla, a longtime comedian who has stayed true and therefore funny. And he mocked the people you just saw as exactly what they are, humorless babies.
I need to explain to the people at Netflix, which is another interesting dynamic, is your job isn't that important, and it doesn't really change hearts and minds. I think people have this thing where it's like Dave Chappelle is going to mobilize this group of our society, which never really seems to be mobilized. Like his words hurt, and his words are going to cause X, Y, and Z. No, they're not. He's a comedian. He gets to say what he wants, and then he gets paid, and you get paid, and that's called entertainment.
He's a comedian. He gets to say what he wants. That's no longer the rule in a lot of places, but Adam Carolla lives by that rule still. He joins us tonight. Adam, thank you so much for coming on. How do you do comedy in a moment like this? You still do stand-up?
Yes. I was on a stage at the Improv in Hollywood last night, and I was on a stage with another comedian, and I started getting into some subject matter, and I could see in his eyes, like, don't go there. We don't want to get into trouble. And that's a very troubling notion. Comedians second-guessing themselves, worried about getting into trouble, and also this notion of these idiots saying because a comedian says something, people are going to go do it, as if you did whatever George Carlin was talking about in the 70s, or Mort Saul, or Richard Pryor. You know, it's even like when they were accusing Trump of telling people to inject bleach. Okay, he's dangerous because he told people to inject bleach. How many Americans injected bleach? This is the President of the United States, and this is their excuse for canceling everyone, because they know people don't listen to Dave Chappelle or Trump saying to inject bleach. It's just an excuse for them to have dominion over you.
It may be, however, that they're on to at least one point. The one thing that average people might copy from a comedian is the willingness to mock the people in charge. Maybe that's what they fear. They don't want to be mocked.
Yeah, and there's a definite truth in comedy that cuts right to the core, and they know if they lose and can't silence that community, there's going to be issues. Remember when Jon Stewart was on Stephen Colbert's show several months ago, and he was like, hello, Wuhan lab leak, there's a virology lab up the street, don't you think? Watch Colbert's reaction to that. He was like, oh my God, one of our own has crossed the line. But it's not crossing the line, it's a comedian being funny and making observations that are patently true.
So how have you, I've always wondered, I don't know if I've ever asked you, how have you continued to act like it's 1986 when it's not? Why doesn't it affect you?
Well, this is going to sound self-serving, but you'll see it almost everywhere. You have to be good. If you're good, you say what you want. Dave Chappelle is good. Jon Stewart is good. They say what they want. Most people live in the middle. If you're a journalist and you have any kind of integrity, you quit your job at the New York Times and you go to Substack. Those are the good ones. But most people aren't good. Most people are in the middle. And when you're in the middle, whether you work for a big corporation or the New York Times or Netflix, you need to keep your job. Most Americans want to keep their job over about anything else. They're not good enough, and they don't feel they're good enough to say whatever they want and do whatever they want.
Well, that's a really good point. I wonder, though, when all of this ends, won't a lot of comedians be ashamed that they went along with speech codes, which are antithetical to comedy and free thinking?
Comedians eat Count Chocula at 4 in the morning in a bathrobe in their living room every night. They do not feel shame. They don't have the shame gears that the rest of America is constrained by. So no, they don't normally feel shame. They eat edibles, stay up all night, and make fart jokes. So they're a hard demographic to shame. But my feeling is if you're a comedian, you got in it to say what you wanted to say, and if you're curtailing that in any way, especially because some woke a-holes are going after you, then you're a coward and you've given in to the mob, and you become a comedian to push back against the man. And the man is not Ron DeSantis. The man is the woke mob if you're a comedian.
Well, that's exactly right. Do you worry that venues where you're performing could be shut down?
No, but it doesn't mean it can't happen. I don't have a choice. I'm a comedian. I have to say what I'm thinking. Some people like it, some people won't like it, but the second that process ends, I got to go back to carpentry.
Still living like it's a free country. Adam Carolla joins us tonight. Adam, thank you so much.
Thanks, Tucker.
So the one thing you know about fascists is they ban books. Kind of weird that books are getting banned all around us all of a sudden. We've got details. We'll be right back. One thing you never thought you would see in the United States of America is book banning. Book banning. If you're in your 50s, you grew up hearing from your teachers that that was the hallmark of a fascist society. Book banning. But it's everywhere now. It's everywhere. Attacks on freedom of speech in the form of banning books. It's unbelievable. As Dave Chappelle pointed out, any author who deviates from left-wing orthodoxy is attacked immediately and erased. Watch.
Cancel people that are more powerful than me. We canceled J.K. Rowling. My God, J.K. Rowling wrote all the Harry Potter books by herself. She sold so many books, the Bible worries about her. And they canceled her because she said in an interview, and this is not exactly what she said, but effectually, she said that gender was a fact. And then the trans community got mad as shit. They started calling her a TERF. I didn't even know what that was. But I know that trans people make up words to win arguments.
So people have been trying to ban books for, well, since the invention of the printing press and even before. But for generations in this country, you had brave, civil liberties-minded publishers who bucked those trends. In fact, throughout the English-speaking world, you had publishers, most of them left-wing, by the way, who said, no, free people have a right to read whatever they want. But those publishers don't exist anymore. In fact, we're down to pretty much just one that we know of. The name of that company is Skyhorse Publishing, and it has done what civil libertarians did for many years. It has published works by canceled authors, in their case, Woody Allen, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., among many others. So the man behind this enterprise, the man who clings so tightly to the ideal of free speech in a country becoming authoritarian, is Tony Lyons, and we are grateful to have him join us tonight. Tony, thank you so much for coming on. So I've talked to you before, not on the air. I have no idea what your politics are. I really don't know what your politics are, but you seem to go out of your way to publish books that people don't want published. So it must be intentional.
Yeah, so I think freedom of speech is the most important freedom we have, and it's besieged at every side. So, the left wants to shut down freedom of speech in so many different ways. The right is there, calling for more speech, more dialogue, more debate. And I've been right in the middle of it, publishing book after book by authors like you said, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Dr. Robert Malone, Dr. Pierre Corey, many of the doctors who've been deplatformed and censored and canceled.
What's so interesting is just take the case of Bobby Kennedy's book about Tony Fauci and about the corona experience that all of us watched. So that book would never have been published really by anyone but you. That's why you published it. But I think it did blockbuster numbers. I think you sold a lot of copies. I'm sure you made a lot of money. I sure hope you did. So why wouldn't Simon & Schuster do that? I thought these were profit-making companies.
Yeah, so I think that the big four publishing companies do not want to deal with the government censorship that's been happening and the censorship internally, and the censorship even from their own writers. So they feel pressure from every side and they buckle under it. And I feel pressure, but like I said when we spoke last, I think it's more dangerous to have a country where we don't have the right to publish whatever we want, to have people read whatever they want, to make the choices for themselves. And there's so many ways that free speech and dialogue is getting shut down in this country. And it's, all the big tech companies have buckled to the government, and it just has to stop. And I want to be part of that process.
Boy, well, you're not only part of the process, you are leading the process. You are leading the fight. Probably something you never thought you'd wind up doing, but we're grateful that you are. Tony Lyons, Skyhorse Publishing, thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
So it's not just that they're going to prevent you from doing a comedy show in a venue or selling your book on Amazon, though that has happened a lot. How about if they prevented you from living, from having a job, from using money? What if they use the payment processors that so many people rely on to live to force you to comply? What if they shut you down economically if you engaged in wrongthink? What if? Well, the group Gays Against Groomers doesn't need to guess what if. They were just banned by PayPal and Venmo for opposing the sexualization and castration of children in the name of gender-affirming care. They've also spoken out against drag shows for children, which are becoming common. Here are some examples of what the group opposes.
Strike the pose.
So Gays Against Groomers criticize that. That doesn't seem out of bounds. Oh, but it is, and they've been punished. Jamie Mitchell is the founder of Gays Against Groomers and joins us tonight. Jamie, thanks so much for coming on. So the idea that you could not simply be deplatformed but demonetized, I don't think occurred to most Americans until recently. Tell us what happened to you.
Right. Well, that was really shocking to us, too. I mean, I knew going into this battle, fighting pedophilia and the grooming of children, that it would be an uphill battle and that big tech would try and censor us for wrongthink. But we really were not expecting payment processors to cut us off. But, it's just telling that how effective we're being from inside the community fighting this. I don't think they ever expected that. And we were destroying the narrative and their agenda, and they did what they could to put a stop to it. But unfortunately, it's only made us stronger and gotten us more support.
I really hope that it has. I always wonder, though, if you're you and you're running this group that's, pretty new and you're getting a lot of support and all of a sudden they shut off your payment processors, what do you do? Who do you appeal to? Who comes to the rescue and helps?
Right. Well, we didn't really, I appealed, but we still haven't heard anything back. And to be clear, even if we were allowed back on, we wouldn't go. We wouldn't use their services anymore because they have come out in support of pedophilia. But what we did was we just went to a more, friendly, non-woke platform, which right now has been DonorBox. They have been good to us so far. I might be jinxing it, but you kind of just got to roll with the punches and adapt to overcome it. And, it's good to see that there are alternative things coming out, alternative companies and payment processors that are being launched, because I really think that's what it's going to take to have this parallel economy, so to speak. And, we're just going to keep adapting, and it hasn't stopped our support. Like I said, it just keeps growing. So honestly, we appreciate the free press because, to have people attack us for just simply wanting to stop the sexualization and mutilation of children, it does a lot more to expose who they are than us. So
it really does.
We roll with it, but it's sad. It's really sad that that's where we're at.
What a great attitude you have, and I appreciate your honesty and your fearlessness. And thank you for joining us tonight. Jamie Mitchell, Gays Against Groomers. Thanks.
Thank you.
So opening up a major social media platform, to restate, is the single biggest threat imaginable to the people who are running the country into the ground. And so when Elon Musk said, hey, I'm for free speech, that meant they had to crush him, and they're working on that now. But it also means that accounts and people who've been banned for months from Twitter or years, like the Babylon Bee, for example, might be allowed to speak once again. The Babylon Bee's Seth Dillon joins us next on that.
Welcome to Fox News Live. I'm Matt Finn in Los Angeles. Grisly new details about the killing of 4 college students in Moscow, Idaho. According to a coroner, some or all were found stabbed to death in their beds and might have been asleep when the attack happened. The bodies were found last Sunday. Police have not yet named a suspect or a motive. Authorities have released a map tracing some of the victims' last moves. It can be viewed on foxnews.com. Attorney General Merrick Garland has named a special counsel to oversee 2 Justice Department investigations into former President Donald Trump. The DOJ is investigating classified documents found at the former president's Mar-a-Lago home. There is also a separate probe investigating the origins of the January 6 Capitol riots. This all comes just days after Trump formally launched his 2024 presidential run. I'm Matt Finn. Now back to Tucker Carlson Tonight.
So it may be, looking back, say, 10 years from now, that one of the most consequential decisions in the history of big tech may have been Twitter's snap decision to ban the satire site Babylon Bee. What did the site do wrong? Well, it mocked Rachel Levine, the fake trans admiral that Joe Biden insists we describe as a man. Twitter's ban was publicized. Elon Musk saw it and was outraged by it. Not because he's a right-winger, but because he believes in the First Amendment. Fast forward to today, Elon Musk now owns Twitter, and the Biden administration is trying to destroy him. They're talking about investigating him. The president from the podium not long ago suggested he might be a threat to national security. So all of this began with the banning of the Babylon Bee. Seth Dillon is the CEO of Babylon Bee. His conversation with Elon Musk, we played part of it a moment ago. He joins us tonight. Seth, thanks so much for coming on. So Elon Musk seemed to see, a lot of people have been banned on Twitter, but when you got banned, he seemed to see it as a red line being crossed. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, I think it all goes back to the primary issue of free speech. He calls himself a free speech absolutist. And one of the things that free speech protects is the right to make jokes. You know, you have the right to be wrong. You have the right to make jokes. When you can't even laugh, you know, you can't even poke fun at these ideas, especially these ideas that are really crazy. We have this situation where, you know, this worldview needs to be propped up. The left's insane ideology needs to be propped up by silencing people on the other side, especially people who mock them and expose their foolishness. You know, I think Musk saw that as being problematic, and so it's part of the reason, I guess, why he decided to step in and take some action.
I'm glad he did. Do you think he's the richest man in the world, famously, or was on the day he bought it, in any case. but there's so much institutional resistance to allowing Americans to speak freely. Do you think he will be able to restore free speech, legal speech, might be a better definition, to Twitter?
I hope so. I mean, for all of our sakes, I hope so. There is a lot of resistance. You know, he's facing pressure from advertisers who are facing pressure from these activist groups. What he's threatened right now is this system that they had set up, right? They have all this power. They've empowered these activists by basically giving them a sword and a shield, right? They can strike down anything as misinformation or hate speech that they want. They can smear you all that they want. And then they have a shield on the other hand. That's their sword. They have a shield on the other hand where you can't make fun of them, you can't criticize them, or you get banned. Musk has threatened to take away that shield, and they will fight, I think, to the death to try to prevent him from doing that. So he's got a tough battle ahead of him.
And I think you're absolutely right. I don't think you're overstating it. I mean, I think and I hate the word existential, but that's what this is for them. Did you understand how important censorship was for the people currently in charge to keep their power? I mean, they seem to think it's the most important thing.
They do, and I mean, there's a reason for that. You know, mockery and criticism, you know, it can expose foolishness. It can make you look silly. I think that's the big weak point, especially when the ideas that you're trying to defend are indefensible. You know, you don't want to have arguments about it. You want to shut down the debate before the debate even happens. You know, I didn't expect that it would come to the point that it's come to, and that we would see the kind of content moderation, as they like to call it, that we're seeing, that basically just silences one side of the discussion and takes out even people who are trying to use humor effectively in the conversation. But you know, here we are. We're in this place, and I don't know. I'm excited. I'm hopeful that maybe, you know, Musk will be able to fight back and do something about this. He's certainly facing a lot of challenges right out the gate.
Yeah, he certainly is. Seth Dillon, whose banning started it all. Great to see you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we opened the show by telling you about the comedian Josh Denny, who has been silenced as a comedian because he has pro-life views. He's not the only one, though. John Gibson was the CEO of Tripwire, a video game company. He's a very famous video game developer. Last year, he tweeted this, and this is the whole tweet, quote, "Proud of the U.S. Supreme Court affirming the Texas law banning abortion for babies with a heartbeat. As an entertainer, I don't get political often. Yet with so many vocal peers on the other side of the issue, I felt it was important to go on the record as a pro-life game developer." That was it. He didn't threaten anyone. He didn't even attack anyone. He just said what he believed. Well, for tweeting that, he lost his job. The company that he started and was majority owner of, or had the largest ownership stake in, and then the media decided to destroy him personally. It was an unbelievable experience. We spoke to John Gibson at length for an hour on Tucker Carlson Today about it. Here's part of the conversation.
I call it social terrorism.
Yes.
It is an effort to use fear and intimidation to cause people to change, either hide or pretend that they're not what they are really, so that they can keep their jobs, so that they can keep their status. And I just think that's just a terrible thing for the world.
Well, it's prima facie evil, for one thing. Terrorism is always wrong. You know, everything should be voluntary. I mean, you can't force people to believe something. That's crazy. You know, that's 8th century Islam. You know, converted would be beheaded or something. It's really, but there was not one person, and by the way, I wrote down social terrorism because I'm stealing that and not giving you credit, sorry. No, that's such a great phrase, and it's such a more precise phrase than cancel culture, which is like pathetic and weak. It doesn't describe the phenomenon. But there, just to be clear, there was not one person in your world who stood up and said, we cannot crush this man because he has a different view.
There was one person within the company, a lady that was resistant to what they were doing to me.
Good for her.
And she was fairly senior, and I really appreciated her, you know, sort of standing up and pushing back. But it was difficult for her too. I mean, she was outnumbered, but also in the position she was in, she was having to deal with a lot of the fallout, and that's that's how this social terrorism works. Is you make people scared, you make their jobs more difficult, you make them worry that people are going to leave the company if they don't, throw the person who disagreed with their political positions out of the boat. And so she really couldn't overcome the wave of sentiment of the other folks. And then the people the other people that agreed, they're afraid to speak up. They don't want to be next. I had one of the other owners of the company, politically were very aligned. He thinks cancel culture is bad. He thinks abortion's bad. And he said, yeah, I don't want to be canceled next.
How heartbreaking was that? I mean, these are your friends. You created the company with them. You worked with them for 20 years, and to see them participate in this must have just destroyed you.
Tucker, words can hardly convey how crushed I was. Everyone that works puts a little bit of themselves into something, or maybe a lot.
Yeah.
When you're doing something that like this, that was just a passion, something you used to do for free, and you just absolutely love it, and it's, you spent 20 years, 25 of years of your life crafting the skill set, and you're at the top of your game, and you love what you do every day. You just love coming into work and making people happy, and we were making, sure, millions of fans happy, but also the company would take 10% of our profits and divide it up amongst the employees. And there was a lot of profit. And people were going out and buying cars and houses, and I would see people coming into work smiling and happy, and I just loved having a job where I got to make not just the public happy, but the employees happy. And to have that all destroyed, to feel like, well, I shared something with my wife. I'll tell you what I said to her. I said, I just want to die.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to live in a world that's this unjust.
I agree.
And yeah, I got depressed. I got, of course, angry, suicidal, not wanting to leave the house. Yeah, it destroyed me. And I have lived through 13 months of hell.
The entire episode will be available next week to stream on Fox Nation. Well, it wasn't that long ago that the Biden administration was trying to censor you in a very obvious way with the Ministry of Truth and the Mary Poppins lady they put in charge of it, and that would have happened if the Biden administration had succeeded. What exactly would this country have looked like? That question's next. Well, it's hard to believe this actually happened, but not so long ago, the Biden administration tried to set up a Ministry of Truth in this country. They hired some Mary Poppins lookalike, Nina Jankowicz, to silence anyone who criticized the Biden administration. Now, they're still doing this. They're not doing it openly. They tried to do it openly, and they couldn't, mostly because Nina Jankowicz was just too ridiculous to sell. She was openly partisan. She was dumb. She was an advocate for censoring any news that damaged the Biden administration. She also posted videos like this one. Watch.
Information laundering is really quite ferocious. It's when a huckster takes some lies and makes them sound precocious by saying them in Congress or a mainstream outlet. So disinformation's origins are slightly less atrocious. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. It's how you hide a little lie. When Rudy Giuliani shared bad intel from Ukraine, or when TikTok influencers say COVID can cause pain, they're laundering disinfo, and we really should take note and not support their lies with our wallet, voice, or vote. Oh!
Yeah. Better wake up and get involved, or your future will consist of asking for permission to exercise your own most basic rights from people like that. In the end, those videos were so embarrassing that the Biden administration had to fire Jankowicz and scrap her Ministry of Truth. But of course, they did not give up their efforts to censor Americans. They can't, because censorship is the key. It's the linchpin to maintaining power for them. Chris Bedford is with the Common Sense Society. He joins us to assess what they're doing now to shut you up. Chris, great to see you tonight. So Nina Jankowicz was so absurd that she had to go away, but they didn't stop because they can't, correct?
Correct. And she hasn't even really gone away. Just this month, she's been quoted in the New York Times. She's been quoted in Bloomberg. These supposedly serious publications quoting such a thoroughly unserious person to decide what senators and congressmen and you and other people are, what questions you're allowed to ask about the attack on Paul Pelosi. Asking questions, according to the New York Times, is now disinformation. Not allowed to say that. So she's still out there. And what's worse, she's working at this British think tank she went back to, the Center for Information Resilience, and there's a bunch of other clowns there, people who say that places like Cambridge Analytica and Republican firms that use data the same way that Obama did are part of a Christian nationalist plot. But at the same time, they're working with AEI experts on war in the Balkans. They're working with former CIA analysts because the intelligence groups that try to assess enemy countries' disinformation campaigns and espionage campaigns and the things they do during war are mixing seamlessly with a lot of the Democratic partisans who come in there and try to work like she did with the Department of Homeland Security. They say they treat you like a terrorist, essentially. They treat you the exact same way. They mix these reports together. They get former CIA directors and former FBI directors to come out and back it up and make it all very serious. I can't believe how right people like Glenn Greenwald were back in the day about all of this when they first saw it.
Well, and Alex Jones, for that matter, who said our intel agencies are interfering in domestic politics. And people like me said, that's impossible. That's illegal. It's immoral. It's totalitarian. That can't possibly be happening. You're crazy. But that is happening openly.
The amount of people, I was very doubtful at first when these things first started to come out. When people were saying that the same groups that are being set up to fight Al-Qaeda will someday be turned on American citizens. I said, that's ridiculous. I went to Ground Zero shortly after I saw it. I felt that pain. It was awful to be around, and people were really frightened. But all those people were completely right. The government's doing this. The government's working with Twitter now. It's coming out. The government's working to shut down scientists, to shut down doctors, to shut down people who later turn out to be completely correct. And at the same time, places like Google are working with the New York Times, working with foreign disinformation think tanks to try and shut down journalism, to try and shut down places like I used to work at, the Federalist, cut them off from advertising. This is a pernicious campaign. It's about information. It's about banking, which you've touched on. And it's even about comedy and movies. Why can't we just have an open conversation in this country anymore?
No, not at all. Because it threatens their power. Because they have an open conversation, they can't win. Of course, they'll lose. Chris Bedford, what a great summation. I appreciate it. Good to see you tonight.
Good to see you.
So we've talked a lot about free speech over the last year, but one of the most interesting conversations we've had about it actually was with Kid Rock, the entertainer. We did a documentary on him. He just released an entire album about free speech. Here's part of what he told us. So if there was, a message behind the album, what would it be?
To my fans, I love you dearly. To you critics, haters, and trolls, go yourself.
That's pretty clear in the album, isn't it? Like you're not kind of hiding that message, are you?
Half the things I do is to solidify my fans, and I'll say a lot in this interview, my friends, family, and fans. That's really all that matters to me. But I love the trolls and the haters and the critics who've been trying to, knock me down for 20, 30 years. And I'm still standing, still operating at the highest levels. And so sometimes I do things purposefully, just to kind of be a wise ass or look like a little bit of a just because my fans will get the tongue in cheek and the fun it, and the people that hate me will just go, God damn it. It'll just piss them off more.
So why haven't you been canceled? Like, people aren't allowed to say what they think. You are.
I am uncancelable.
Why's that?
Because I don't give a And I'm not in bed with any big corporate things at the end of the day. There's nobody I'm beholden to, no record companies, no corporate interests, no nothing. And you can't cancel me. I love it when they try. I'm like, yeah, let's have some fun.
Why aren't there more artists like that?
Because they're in bed with record companies and, corporate deals and structures at every level. And, it's, and if someone finds a way to get me a little bit here and there, I'll find another way around it.
You never see artists talk like that. They seem very easy to intimidate. At what point did you realize, you're just not going to be intimidated?
Day one.
Really?
I think I crawled out of the womb with both middle fingers in the air.
The documentary is called, fairly straightforwardly, Life of a Rock Star, Kid Rock. It's on Fox Nation. More news straight ahead.
the life of a rock star.
Tucker Carlson's in the house tonight, yo.
See what happens when Tucker meets Kid Rock and gets a better understanding of the man and how he became uncancelable.
There's nobody I'm beholden to. You can't cancel me.
Tucker Carlson Originals, Life of a Rock Star, Kid Rock, streaming now.
Tonight, and of course, tune in every night, 8 p.m. The show that's a sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. Have the best night with the ones you love. We'll see you in a minute.